Well, hey guys, have you ever been there where you just don't have any volunteers, or even the volunteers that you have just feel like they don't want to be there, or they're not engaged? They just totally are. It seems like, why do you even show up? Have you ever been there? You feel like you're calling people and they always are out of town. They're always not available. You just don't seem to have the volunteers that you want, and even those that you have, you're like, not very good. So I want to talk in this video about how do you go from volunteer misery, where your volunteers just don't like volunteering, your volunteers don't want to be there, to volunteer engagement, where you have volunteers that are coming to you to sign up, and not just volunteers, but volunteers that you actually want to be volunteering, right? Because we've all been there where we're like praying for volunteers to not volunteer, to unvolunteer themselves. But so how do we go from volunteer misery to volunteer engagement? That's what I want to talk about in this video. I'm Ryan Latham, and I share tips and tools and conversations to help you and your ministry grow. And in this video, we're going to talk about how to go from volunteers that feel like they're in misery to volunteers that are fully engaged. And this video also is not just for your volunteers. If you oversee staff, maybe part-time or full-time staff members, these three things that we're going to share today will really help you engage them and have them feel like they're more engaged, and also help them. And my hope would be that you'd have lower employee, lower volunteer turnaround. And so let's talk about it. Here's the three things that I think that you should have or be doing on a consistent basis to help your volunteers, help your staff go from feeling like they're in misery to feeling like they're fully engaged. So the first one is this: amenity. So this is where people feel like, sorry, it's a little bit stickier than I thought, but where they feel like they are not known. So the opposite of amenity is known. So these are where people feel known, right? We've all been there where we feel like we're volunteering somewhere, even maybe we're on staff somewhere, and we don't feel like we're known. Okay, so here's a way that you might know that you are leading some volunteers into misery as opposed to engagement. One would be this: is say you've got a volunteer that has a brand new baby. Okay, they have a brand new baby, and they come back and you don't acknowledge it at all. You don't acknowledge that they just had a baby. You don't acknowledge, hey, congratulations. You don't text them. You don't visit them. You don't do anything about the fact they just had a brand new baby. And they come back to volunteering, and you just jump right into, hey, here's what we're doing tonight. Here's how you can help us, all this kind of thing. And so that just makes a volunteer, especially a staff member, feel very much like they're not known, that you don't even know what's going on in their life. Maybe you have a volunteer that just gets married, and maybe you text them on your weekly, maybe it's your midweek service or your Sunday morning service, and you text them and say, hey, are you coming today? And they're like, hey, we're on our honeymoon, like we're not going to make it, right? Like that just tells them straight, right there in the moment, you don't know them, you don't know about their life. All they are just kind of pawns in this game that you're playing. And so we want to move to where people feel known, that when they have these major events in their life, that we're texting them, we're sending them cards, we're acknowledging that, we're celebrating their birthdays, we are celebrating anniversaries, we're celebrating milestones. I think that even they're going deeper into their lives and celebrating, if we can just text even their kids' birthdays, or major deaths in somebody's family. When we can acknowledge those things, what it does is it tells your people that you know them, that you care about them, and that they're more than just people that show up and help you run this ministry. They're actually known. Okay, and so we want to make sure the first thing, if you want to go from employee or volunteer misery into engagement, then what we want to do is we want to make sure that they feel known. The second thing is feeling irrelevancy. Irrelevancy. This is big, and I talk about this quite often in a lot of my videos. Is that you really want to make sure that people know that their role matters, that what they're doing actually matters. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in here, that we are going to actually begin to get into volunteer engagement. All right, they're no longer going to be feeling misery. They're going to actually begin to feel like they're engaged, they're a part of something. And we can do that when we make sure that they understand that their role, their job matters. So, the person that is greeting, right? Why does their role matter in the big picture? How does their role impact and affect people's lives? That's what it's about. It's not just keeping this door open, but this is about really engaging how did their job affect people and impact people and into the bigger scope of the picture of the ministry, the bigger vision, right? So you opening that door allows for there to be a great smile that they see, right? It's not just opening the door with a frown, but opening the door with a smile. That they walk into a warm environment, the check-in counter, right? That kids, students, adults are coming in and they're being greeted. Their questions are being answered. Your role matters because it creates a warm environment for people's guards to be let down, for them to then receive the message later, right? The food, maybe some of you guys are serving food in your ministries, right? Now, why does that matter? Why is it so important? It's not just providing a meal. I remember in our student ministries, we would provide a couple hundred meals every Wednesday night, and we would give it to them. We'd serve it, I think we charged $1.50, something like that for that meal. And our volunteers every week would figure out how to make this meal for $1 a student. And so they knew that a couple hundred students were going to buy maybe 100 or more. So they knew they had a budget of $100, maybe, about like that. And so they'd get donations, things like that, or they'd supplement it. But what they knew is that they were providing a meal for students that otherwise couldn't have that meal because of the service times, and a lot of our students didn't have the money to really go out and do that. And so it provided this warm environment for them to come feel safe, for them to come and get a great meal, a home-cooked meal that a lot of our students didn't have very often. And so, again, it mattered what they were doing. Small group leaders, sound engineers, all those things. Why does their job matter? Why does them volunteering matter? It's not just, hey, show up, do this, hey, but why does it matter what they're doing? I encourage you, student leaders, team leaders, adult leaders, staff members, whatever it might be, if you want to go from misery to engagement, here's what you got to be doing. You got to make sure that they understand that their job matters. But before that, we've got to make sure that they're known, right? That they know that we know them, okay? The third thing is this, in measurement. Oh man, you've heard me talk about this before. In measurement, this is probably one of the biggest things for me personally. I just feel like so many people have no measurements for success. They have no measurements. It's just this ongoing thing. I listened to Simon Sinek talking about this, that oftentimes in ministry, we talk a lot about sports analogies. We use, hey, we just got to score a touchdown. Hey, this is Super Bowl, and things like that. And he talked about that those aren't always the best metaphors or stories for to connect to, because those have time frames. This game, there's 5 games, or there's 15 games, and things like that. And then there's a time frame, and there's 40, whatever it is, 60 minutes, or 40, whatever the sports is, right? There's time frames on that. Where in life, there's not really a time frame. It's ongoing. It just keeps on going. And in life, you have to begin to create artificial timelines and artificial goals. You have to create so he talks about making metaphors closer to that life, like in your health, right? Like you could just continue to eat however you want, but you create metaphors. You create goals. You create those things. And it's not just this that like in sports where it's already defined for you. In life, we have to define it for ourselves. And so it's a little bit more like ministry, where we have to define it for ourselves. And so really, it's growth. It's growth. How are we growing? How are we achieving goals? How are we making that happen? Okay, so for example, there was a story about this kid that got a job at a fast food restaurant, and it wasn't a very good fast food restaurant. And there was a new manager that came in, and saw that the employees were pretty unengaged, just were kind of going through the motions, doing whatever. And so this manager decided to go to this new employee at the fast food counter, actually at the window, right? And he said, "Hey, how would you know tonight if you had a great night, serving customers?" And the kid said, "I don't know. I don't know. I just make sure that they all got their food." He said, "Well, I want you to think about, because I want to ask you, did you have a good night tonight? And I want you to think about how would you know how you could answer that." The kid said, "Well, maybe like the number of cars that come through." And the manager said, "Well, do you really have impact on the number of cars that come through?" And the kid said, "Not really, because that's like, I don't know, advertising, marketing. Okay, so that's not really a good measurement." He said, "How about the number of food orders that we pass out?" And the manager said, "Well, do you really have an impact on that?" He said, "Well, not really, because again, the number of cars, and then who knows how many people are in that car and how much food they want. I don't really have an impact on that." And so he said, "Okay, well, think of it again." So the kid said, "Well, how about the speed at which they go through the line?" And the manager said, "Well, do you have an impact on that?" And he said, "Well, not really, because the cooks are really in part of that. I just put the food order in, and then I have to wait for the cooks and the people to put it together. I just hand it." So he said, "Well, that's not a good measurement." So then the kid said, "Well, what about the accuracy of each order?" And so again, the manager said, "Well, do you have impact on that?" And he said, "Well, yeah, because I have to make sure that it's all put in there." And he said, "Okay, great, awesome, that's a great measurement for you. So let's see at the end of the night how accurate all of your orders were." And then the manager said this. How about this? How about we also measure not just the accuracy of every bag, but how about we also measure how many people in the cars you can get to laugh?" And the kid said, "What?" And he said, "Yeah. So we're gonna measure at the end of the night. I'm gonna ask you, was it a good night? And I want you to measure that by how many people laughed and smiled and how accurate your orders were." Okay. So now all of a sudden that kid went from totally just doing his fast food job to all of a sudden he had a measurement of growth. I need to get better at making people laugh, smiling. And so he began to think about every order. Is it accurate? All kind of thing. See, waiters and waitresses have this kind of built in, right? Because they have to get tips, right? And so they have this kind of built in to make people feel good or to get their food accurate, because otherwise it's going to hurt their tips. But a lot of our ministries, we don't get tips, right? A lot of our ministries, we don't have those defined goals, those defined achievements. And so what happens is people, first of all, don't know what they're doing, so they're just kind of doing whatever. And secondly, or they make it their own. And maybe it's not the right ones that you even want, right? If that kid at the fast food restaurant was how fast I could get him through, maybe he wouldn't be as accurate, maybe he wouldn't be as nice, right? So the manager helped him set goals that were measurements that helped him to know how to achieve the bigger picture of that place. So I would encourage you guys to begin to look at all three of these. Are your volunteers, your staff known? Holidays, do you send out a message to them? Birthdays, anniversaries, maybe even a major death in someone's family. Do you acknowledge those? Have you really gotten take the time to just take them out to lunch and not try to tell them about the next ministry opportunity for them, but just to get to know them and to say, "Hey, man, we know you, we care about you." And do you actually not just know them, but make it known that you know them? Second one is that they matter. And a lot of people say, "Well, of course they know, it's the gospel." Well, no. Why does their job as a greeter, as passing out a packet of information, how does that fit into the greater picture? Constantly bringing their job back into the greater ministry purpose of we are impacting people, right? Because when people don't understand it, maybe again, if you're leading staff, how does the receptionist job really matter to the greater picture and impacting people's lives? How does the finance people really impacting people's lives? Really, you want to always make sure that we're pointing it back to people's lives, that what you're doing is impacting people's lives. And the third one is growth. People want to know that they're growing. In your ministry as an adult volunteer, are they growing? Are they getting better? Is your ministry, your leadership development that you're giving to your leaders, helping them grow as people, helping them grow in their marriage, helping them grow in their ministry opportunities? And so we want to continually create this leadership development where they're getting better, they're growing, but it often is so stifled by the fact that they don't even know what they're doing. They're just, well, I'll just open this door. Yeah, but there's got to be something more than that. There's got to be something more, because a lot of the measurements that we look at, it's like that kid in the fast food restaurant. They don't have an impact on that measurement. The numbers, right? Now, do they have an impact? Yes. If we point it back to the fact that they do have an impact on it. But a lot of those measurements are beyond them. It's not really defined to their specific role. But we all know this, that a lot of students have come and said, man, it's because that volunteer, that's why I keep coming back, because that volunteer. And so again, tell those stories of that they do fit in. But I would encourage you to find even smaller goals of areas of growth, like that kid in the fast food. Hey, how many cars can you make laugh tonight? That is a smaller defined goal, and now that kid can begin to try and grow and learn to say, hey, how many people can I make laugh tonight? So maybe your greeters, how many people can you make laugh on the way in? And not just let them breeze by as you talk to your fellow greeter, right? But how many people can you have a conversation with? How many people can you make laugh today? And so beginning to find those goals, those areas of growth for them to improve and get better as they volunteer. So here are the 3 things that will help you to go from volunteer misery to volunteer engagement. I want to encourage you guys to take some time, go through there, leave a comment. Which one of these are you strong in? Which one of these do you need to kind of grow in?